but no black character can ever be played by anyone else. The latest. Well, folks, the rule in Hollywood nowadays is that any character can be played by a black person, but no black character can ever be played by anyone else. The latest example of this is that Netflix has now come out with a new Cleopatra series produced by noted Egyptologist and historical expert Jada Pinkett Smith. This is the weirdest Hollywood story of the day. So Netflix.
Okay, first of all, I feel like what Ben Shapiro gets wrong in this opening statement is it's not that a black person cannot be played by a white person. I think that the challenge that you have is for a long period of time, black people are not even allowed to play black people. So now you're in a situation whereby it's controversial if you don't. And it doesn't mean that as a black person I can all of a sudden play as Trump. But when I do that, it just feels like a parody. You know, I feel like this racial situation that we've played into, because of the history we all have, it's tricky. It's tricky waters to walk in.
Has now announced that Jada Pinkett Smith is doing a docu-series on Cleopatra because she's an Egyptologist. Did you know that? Jada Pinkett Smith? Like, there's nobody in America who knows more about the empire of the Ptolemies than Jada Pinkett Smith. And the racially ambiguous queen is now being depicted as black in the Queen Cleopatra docu-series. Here we go.
Cleopatra was trying to save the country that she loved from destruction.
I did what I had to do to protect what is mine.
This is a woman exercising power.
Cleopatra was a Ptolemaic ruler, the very first Ptolemy.
You know, I mean, I think sometimes you can actually just make this into a movie by itself and just call it Queen, Queen Academia or some shit and get away with it. Like, yeah, you don't really need to.
As a general of Alexander the Great.
It's possible that she was an Egyptian.
I imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
She has become an icon.
I am a god.
I don't care what they tell you in school is a pretty good
Her story resonates
summary of this.
with every woman.
I don't care what they tell you in school is a really, really good summary of this. Okay, for people who don't know anything, like literally anything about world history, let me explain that Cleopatra was probably of Greek extraction. The reason that we say this is because she was almost undoubtedly of Greek extraction. Okay, she was part of the Ptolemaic Empire. Here's how it worked. After Alexander the Great conquered vast parts of North Africa and the Middle East and then died, this would be in the 4th century BCE, there was a giant sort of conflict that broke out among his chief generals. Okay, there was the Seleucid Empire. That was one area. One of the empires was the Ptolemaic Empire, right? Ptolemy. Okay, Ptolemy was one of his regional governors, and he ended up taking over that area. He was Greek. All of his descendants were therefore from him. They were Greek. The notion that Cleopatra was black is silly. Again, you're allowed to do this in Hollywood because, of course, the only thing that matters is our weird, parochially American perception of what race matters. It's super, super strange. By the way, we actually have sculptures of Cleopatra. It's not as though there's like nothing to indicate.
Well, the thing is, Mr. Shapiro, what you get wrong, because I understand the ambiguity and the desire of making her black or white or whatever race you desire to make. I think that the world has become so much focused on the wrong things, whereby we stop looking at entertainment for entertainment's sake. Now we just look at it from a what's true, and everybody is trying to fight for truth when truth is subjective. And then it's like, how do I know, right? It's a possibility that when they were taking over North Africa, men's like some black women and they had a black baby. It's a possibility.
What Cleopatra looked like. There's a Roman sculpture of Cleopatra from like the mid-1st century, around the time of her visits to Rome, and she looks Greek because she was probably Greek. It was amazing. The entire Hollywood crowd went totally nuts when it turned out they were trying to cast Gal Gadot as Cleopatra. Gal Gadot undoubtedly looked a lot more like Cleopatra than anybody who's being cast in this particular production. Now, again, you can cast however you want, but I've noticed a certain pattern in Hollywood, which is that people who clearly are not black are now being cast as black. But if you ever did the reverse, then no way, right? That would be racism of the highest order. In fact,
I don't think so. Here's the thing. If we were to play, let's say, the queen, right? The queen just died. And then we were to make the monarchy whatever. If we cast the queen as black, then it's like, damn, man, what the fuck? You know? But if you were to cast Michelle Obama as white, then we have problems. Like, what the fuck is he doing? Because I think there's certain things. The thing with Cleopatra is just the ambiguity. And then the thing with animation being converted into real life, it's like, yeah, it can be any girl, it can be anything. Anyone can resonate with animation. It doesn't necessarily have to be black or white or green or red. It's just that. It's just a story. Like, we're telling a story. This idea and this where I feel things like racism starts to pop up is when people like Ben Shapiro start to say, okay, you know, Moana is white. Like, why? Because, the animator who did it, instead of painting her this, they're painting her that. Like, okay, let's say we're remaking Frozen. I feel like the best actress should be given the role of Elsa. It doesn't necessarily have to be a white person or a green person. It just depends on who can perform Elsa. You know what I mean? And what the director's vision is. So, but there are certain things that if it's like autobiographical, we can't really start playing around. Like, yo, I would be shocked if Elvis was being played by a black man. You know, it's like, what the hell, man? Like, come on.
You'll recall that there was there's this Shonda Rhimes show, Bridgerton, in which is Queen Victoria, is it? I don't watch Bridgerton because I'm a dude and I have testicles. So Bridgerton is a show for women, and also a racially strange show in which a bunch of white people are cast as black people, sort of like Hamilton. A bunch of white people are cast as people of color, and all the rest. And again, if we're just going to do race neutral casting on everything, I'm here for it. Fine, all right, that's cool. But that also means that Ryan Gosling needs to be up for Martin Luther King, right? It also means that we're going to
see. This is where it is again. He keeps missing the point. The idea of things such as Bridgerton, it was just basically taking modern culture and putting it back into the 1800s and being like, oh, this could have been. This is what this could have been. It's a parody and it's an idea that sits on what was happening. It's not reality, right? So you can say, okay, you can write a script, switch it up and be like, what if Martin Luther King was white? What if the dominant race was black? What would happen? You will never do that because white Americans and whites in general will never want to see themselves as below any other race. That's just bad for the system. So the question is, you can't really do that, right? Or you can. I don't know.
need Christian Bale as like Booker T. Washington. Like either you do it or you don't. Okay, you don't get to make up. In this particular case, it's even worse because they're actively trying to claim a thing that was not true for purposes presumably of suggesting that there was a whitewashing of Cleopatra's history. That there was an attempt to whitewash Cleopatra by turning her into a white lady, but actually she was probably a black lady.
No, I think it's just people trying to fit into the ambiguity, whereby you're saying, okay, these guys took over North Africa, they had sex with African women and created a black woman who turned out to be Cleopatra. There's an opportunity for that. Why not explore that idea? Like, I get it. And I said it in my other video, like, yeah, they were being political. But if you want to see the argument, it's just that, hey, why not?
Now, again, she had particularly distinctive facial features. There are paintings of her at the time. There are sculptures of her at the time. But the point that I'm making here is that we view everything now from the peculiarly intersectional lens of what exactly would black people want, presumably like the most radical black activists want to say about a historical incident. And then we just like put it out there. And it's super weird. Netflix putting its money behind that sort of thing. Again, why is Jada Pinkett Smith doing a thing about Cleopatra? Like, explain to me. It's super strange. Yeah. Again, like just a little bit of accuracy would go a long way. Well, none of this makes.
I don't think his points are valid. I feel like I do get it in the desire to make content and stuff like that, but I feel like one of the problems and the mistakes that he's making is not looking at it from a general perspective of what's possible. You know what I mean? Like, if we were to write history and say, okay, let's make Genghis Khan, right? If you pop up and make Genghis Khan a black man and then being like, yeah, this is what he was, you'd be like, man, I don't know about that. If you made him a white man, I'd be like, man, I don't know about that. Because we know the history that's written, right? Whereas if you were to say, okay, there's some descendants who are like this, and then you're like, oh, this is the descendant of Genghis Khan who looks like this, and blah, blah, blah. You don't, that ambiguity allows you to creative control to play with it. That's just what they did. The idea is not about rationalizing and saying, what do black people want? Listen, I could care less if Cleopatra was black, white, green, or red. What I want is representation and opportunity to be able to participate and tell stories in the way I see fit. It's not just for me to sit down and watch a bunch of white people. I grew up believing white people live in TV, like they live in the screen. That's what I believe. We just at a time now where we're saying, no, we don't want that. We want a world whereby the world that we see every day is reflected within the stories we tell, because that is reality. You and I live in societies, because right now we live in a world whereby when I walk outside, most of my neighbors are terrified of just seeing me. Police officers shoot people who look like me out of fear, but there's nothing to fear. We live within the same communities. This is the most oppressed race of all time that is feared, because people are afraid of retaliation within their DNA, within their bones. They feel it. It's like, damn, these people at some point will retaliate, but it's nothing like that. This is just a beautiful race of people who just want to be seen, not necessarily as equal, but to be respected and loved as human beings. And that's it, my friends.